I wanna stay, 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 stay. Hello and welcome to Enchantment of Eternity's review for Charlie X, which is episode 8 of season 1 of Star Trek The Original Series. This video is a part of a series of videos where I review episodes of Star Trek, one episode at a time. In this episode I will cover in this video I will cover the episode Charlie X. So Charlie X is the episode where the Enterprise picks up a human passenger who was found alone, surviving a crash many years ago on this alien world where it was rumors these aliens with super beings exist. And he's very socially awkward and doesn't really integrate very well with the crew, and Kirk tries to mentor him, and that is until he discovers that he has super godlike powers that he uses to make disappear or kill anyone or do awful things like turn them into animals and remove their mouths if they simply annoy him. He takes control of the Enterprise and wants to go to a colony, which Kirk simply can't allow, so he's tries to challenge Charlie because he'd rather die than let this happen. But he fails, but the aliens who had raised him return to retrieve Charlie, and Charlie makes a plea that he should remain with his own kind, and Kirk tries to speak on his behalf, but the aliens say that Charlie would destroy them or they would be forced to destroy him, and the only choice is for them to take him back. So they take Charlie back against his will, and the crew is sad and lament his departure. So there's a Twilight Zone episode. God, I can't believe I forgot it already. I had just looked it up. It's like something like The Most Perfect Day, or hold on, I'm going to look it up right now. This is how prepared I am. I just looked up this episode right before. It's a Good Life. That's what it's called. And this episode very clearly to me is copying that. Now, if you want to be fair to this episode, it was inspired by the Twilight Zone episode, because to be fair, it's not the exact same thing. There are definitely differences. It goes in a different direction. The only similarity really is that there's a kid who's like a spoiled brat with magical powers, and everyone is completely afraid of him and has to do what he wants. But I think that's enough, personally, to make it kind of unoriginal. And I'm amazed. Like, I went back and I read a couple reviews and I watched a couple videos, and none of those reviews mention It's a Good Life, which I think it's worth mentioning. I'm shocked no one else mentioned it. Now, so they might say, oh, well, that's silly because there's tons of stuff like this back in the 60s or whatever. Yeah, they were all copying It's a Good Life, which was originally a short story that was adapted for the Twilight Zone. But anywho, I didn't like that Twilight Zone episode. They remade it for the Twilight Zone movie as well, which is where I first saw it, but then I saw the original. And so I looked it up out of curiosity to see if it aired before this episode did, and lo and behold, it did. It aired in 1961, and this episode aired in 66. So, yeah. Inspired by, shall we say, but they're basically just doing it in space. And I don't know what Roddenberry's obsession with like God-like powers is, but I don't think it's like meaningful. I don't think he's trying to say anything or make commentary. I think it's just like an easy writing tool for him. It's like, oh, what kind of story could we do? Well, let's just have someone with godlike powers terrorize the crew. Where no man has gone before, Squire of Gothos, Encounter of Farpoint, God, there's probably more. Oh, fucking the one with Apollo. What's that called? Who Mourns for Adonis? And yeah, there's tons of godlike creatures that turn up in the original series. I'd sit here forever trying to name them all. He's just got an obsession, and there was a couple in the first season of Next Generation that Roddenberry was most involved with. Like, he's just obsessed with godlike creatures. Get a new shtick, man. That's all I gotta say. And apparently, like, this was based off of one sentence. Like, DC Fontana wrote a script based off of one sentence that Gene Roddenberry wrote that says something like, Charlie finds that he has godlike powers. And so here we are. So, I never liked this episode. I was funny in my research and reviews. A lot of people seem to like this episode. Like, the general consensus is it's not a masterpiece. It's not one of the best episodes ever, but it's still good. I didn't like it, and I think I didn't. I talk about this a lot, where I liked a lot of shows and films that portrayed what it's actually like to be an adolescent, what it's like to be a teenager, even if it's fantastical. I'm not throwing in fantastical powers is fine by me, as long as it captures the essence of what that is like. And this did not seem like what it was like at all. Now, there's a couple things. It's from the 60s, first of all, which made it a bit alienating for me. Grew up in the 80s and was a teenager in the 90s. And so it's, yeah. So the 60s things could have been a factor. The other factor is this kid has completely socially awkward, which to an extent is definitely something I can relate to, but not to this extent. Where he has no concept of human behavior whatsoever. Now, I will say it is an interesting concept that there's this human that was raised on this alien world that they find survived miraculously somehow, and there's we had this argument between Spock and McCoy. Well, was he? Spock think there's these powerful aliens that must have helped him survive, because there's no way he could have survived on his own. And McCoy's like, well, sure he could. Human ingenuity, whatnot. He had the help of the computers. And so it's like this mystery, and he's acting all weird, and he ends up having, he has never been around human beings before, and so he's having to learn what it means to be around humans. Now, I think that's an interesting enough story in on itself. I don't think you need the magical powers. I actually thought it may be more interesting if they just forego the magical powers. But if they really wanted to keep the magical powers and they're really, stuck on that and they must do it, then okay, do the magical powers. But why does he have to be evil? Like, why do we have to immediately jump to It's a Good Life, which is why I think it's a ripoff, because in It's a Good Life, it did kind of make sense how this was a spoiled brat and he would torture people and use his powers to get everything he wants, which I could see kids doing. But they made the story different by having it be an adolescent, a teenager who had no concept of human, social structure or how to socialize with human beings, and that's more interesting. But instead of going with that, instead of sticking with that, they just turned it into It's a Good Life, which made it a lot less interesting to me, because I don't think that the foregone conclusion here is that he would turn evil and torture and terrorize the whole crew. And by the way, kill 20 people by destroying a ship. So the way this episode portrays him, he's a sociopath. Which, because he was raised alone and never interacted with humans before, I do not buy that automatically that would make him a sociopath. And it seems like he has a concept. He should have a concept of right and wrong, and what it's like to interact with other humans, that he wouldn't want to, that they don't, it's not okay to just go around killing them. To automatically assume, this is what Roddenberry does a lot, which bothers me, which he did the same thing in Where New Man Has Gone Before, kind of assumes when you have magical powers, you automatically turn evil and want to kill everyone. And again, I don't think this is a commentary that Roddenberry was trying to make on absolute power. I think if you're looking for that, you're just looking for things that, looking for meaning in the telephone book. It's like, that's not really, there's no deeper meaning behind it, I believe, is my opinion. That Roddenberry is just a simple cheat. It's something that was popular in horror sci-fi in the 60s, magical beings going around terrorizing people. And so it's just, oh, well, other shows, movies do that, so I'll just do that because it's the easy narrative cheat. My opinion, I could be wrong. Don't get me wrong, what D.C. Fontana did with this script, she definitely elevated a bad idea and made it better, but it's still stuck in the rut of, well, we got to make him evil and terrorize the crew. And the way that they portray Charlie X, again, as I said, it's not something I could relate to. It didn't come off as authentic to me because of the fact that he turned evil. I could relate to him. He would seem like understandable young boy if it wasn't for, killing 20 people and ripping people's mouths out and making them vanish and turning a girl to an iguana just because she tried to talk to you. Fuck that kid. I'm sorry. He's a sociopath. He is a killer. So no, I don't relate to him at all. And so that makes a lot of the interactions between him and Kirk and trying to understand why it's not okay to slap a girl on the ass and shit like that, it makes him come off as whiny and annoying because of that. If they got rid of this whole mass murder thing and just ditched the horror plot and made it more of a character story, oh, God forbid. Networks probably wouldn't have liked that. Although Networks apparently didn't like this episode much either. But if they ditched that and made it a rough character story, this would be a much better episode. I could probably relate to him more, someone who doesn't understand social interactions and is having a hard time trying to integrate in human society. Focus on that. Keep the godlike powers if you must keep it a sci-fi, but don't turn him into a sociopath. Make him use the godlike powers, but not to kill people, maybe in weird ways, and maybe some ways that are unintentionally harmful. Sure, you could go that way, but not ripping someone's fucking face off. That was a fucking horrifying scene. And you might say, well, it's effective horror then, if it really scared the shit out of you. Yeah, but it made me think of Charlie as a monster, as a Michael Myers, Jason serial killer, which is not what the ending of this episode wants you to think about. And I had people alright, so let me jump to this ending because I think it follows the point that I'm making. The ending is bullshit because Charlie, they show him going around terrorizing crew. As I said, this is a woman who's they're just laughing and all, just for, he didn't even know Charlie was there, and she has her face is completely removed. This horrific, and he turns this girl into a iguana just for trying to talk to him, and he's making people vanish, disappear, essentially, as far as we know, killing them. He already blew up a whole entire ship of 20 people, and he's going around torturing Kirk, forcing Spock to act like a fool against his will, just going and doing all this fucked up shit. And then the aliens come to take them away, and his reaction is no, I don't want to go. You guys are my friends. Please stay with me. Don't let them take me. And, okay, so I want to tell you two things. I want to tell you how Kirk and crew reacted in this episode, and how they should have reacted. So first, let me say how they reacted. How they reacted is they looked all sad. And like, oh no, isn't this sad? And Kirk even spoke up on behalf of Charlie. It's like, well, he should be with his own kind. Is there no way you can just let him stay? Maybe he can learn not to use his powers. And the alien's like, no, sorry, not gonna happen. He's gonna kill you all, or you're gonna have to kill him to save yourself. So, best thing is for me to take him with. And so he cries and goes, I want to stay, and goes away. And Yeoman Rand cries and hugs Captain. Oh, isn't it so sad? So that's number one. That's how they reacted. Number two is how they should have reacted. Yes! Yes! Thank God you're here! Get rid of this motherfucking psychopath! Get rid of this psychopath! We're safe! Thank God! Get this fucker out of here! That is how they should have reacted. I'm sorry. I've heard other reviews talk about, oh, this really is a Star Trek theme of exploring humanity and reaching out and understanding. This is a mass murdering motherfucker who is a sociopath. It's not, oh, he's just young, he doesn't understand. No, he's a fucking sociopath. And this gets back to my other point, is had they portrayed him as a normal adolescent and maybe did some harmful things out of misunderstanding, that's not how they portrayed him. If they portrayed him that way, then yes, I could understand this ending. Oh, he just didn't understand, we gotta teach him more. But that's not what we've been shown. We've been shown that he's a cold-blooded killer. He is a serial killer. He is a fucking Charles Manson. He's a fucking, Ted Bundy. He is a Michael Myers. He's a fucking monster. He's a serial killer. So this response of Kirk going, oh, couldn't you let him stay, is bullshit. He should be like, oh, thank God, get rid of this fucker. In fact, the reaction should be, having him live on this other planet with all these aliens is too good. Can you just scatter his atoms across the galaxy, or trap him in this tiny prison where he's stuck in the rest of life? That's more befitting of this fucker's actions. That should have been how they reacted. I'm sorry. See, I feel like I'm coming off as kind of cold-blooded compared to these other reviews. Oh, haven't we have compassion? Because I think they're buying into what the ending of this episode is trying to tell you, but as I said, the rest of the episode does not earn that ending. As I said, there is a way they could have earned this ending had they left out the sociopathic murder, ripping people's faces off bullshit. Once they copied It's a Good Life, they turned him into a sociopath. So this is my point. I believe they copied It's a Good Life, and I think they shouldn't have. They had this original concept. Instead of doing something truly original with it, they just did It's a Good Life. And voila, this ending makes no fucking sense, and it doesn't match with what we've seen earlier. And so that's why I don't like this episode. Anyway, there's some good moments. As I mentioned before, this is the second and last time that we see the the Spock and Uhura flirtation, which I'd never realized until just now, until just going through these episodes, not right now, but in this past month as I've been doing my coverage of this, that they did this. And looking at it, I see. So the first one was in The Naked Time, which I already talked about, which was a nice scene. This one was when Spock and Uhura were playing music together. There was definitely a flirtation. And I've heard someone comment about, oh, the song Uhura sings about Spock is she's equating him to the devil. Isn't that discrimination? But actually, no. What she's saying is, you better watch out for this one. He's a sweetheart. He'll steal your heart. And he stole mine because I kind of have a crush on him. That's what I got from it. And, reading the research on it, that's apparently what they were doing. They were setting up for a romance between these two characters. Now it's very subtle, and they only did it for two episodes, so I can understand why people missed it, because they abandoned it after this episode, and it's something that wouldn't come up until that abomination of a remake that Abrams did. I don't know if he was basing it off of this. I doubt it. He's just like, oh, these are two hot actors, let's have them hook up. But ironically, it does sort of match up with what they were doing. And so I love that scene where Uhura's singing, by the way, that Charlie is a darling, a darling, a darling. It was, and God, again, R.I.P. the great Michelle Nichols. And I like how they utilized her, because she actually had singing talent. And originally this scene was written as her being an impressionist and doing impressions of the crew, but then they, talked to the Michelle Nichols, and this is like, well, I'm actually got quite talented as a singer, so instead they turned it into a musical piece, and I think it works much better that way. Now, I actually, a lot of times you'll see me criticize musical pieces in Star Trek, but sometimes I think it really works, such as in this instance, and it was a good showing this interaction with the crew. And as I said, I feel like this is something the show loses a bit going forward, that it focuses too much on the Kirk, Spock, McCoy trinity and not enough on side characters like Uhura. But yeah, it was a nice moment. The sort of Rand crush that Charlie has, again, it kind of makes sense, having crush on the older woman that you think is hot, and she doesn't really know how to handle it and how to tell him no, which starts out good until, he essentially kills her. But, I already talked about that and how flawed that is. And then, alright, so here's one more point I want to make. Towards the end of the episode, when Kirk and Spock are fully aware of who Charlie is and what he can do, and he's gone around terrorizing the crew seems to have absolutely no idea that Charlie has these magical powers. Why shouldn't Kirk warn them? Wouldn't that be like, the right thing to do, instead of just leaving them going around about their day and not ignoring Charlie? Oh, this is just some kid. Oh, let's laugh in front of them, and nothing's going to be hard. He's not going to rip my face off or anything like that, or turn me into a fucking iguana. Why the fuck did Kirk not warn people about this shit? Now you could say, well, maybe he tried, but Charlie stopped him. I didn't fucking see that. If that was the case, they needed to show that shit on screen. Anyway, and besides that, forgetting about the whole crew, why the fuck didn't he warn Human Rand? Because he already knew that Rand was having an issue with him. He already knew that he had a massive crush on Rand. At the very least, he could have fucking warned her, but she had no idea she had these magical powers, so he bursts into her room, and she stands up to him and he's like, no, Charlie, don't treat me this way. And Kirk was there, it's like, well, maybe he's got magical powers, he can kill you. Might have been nice for her to know that in advance. I don't know, just a thought. Just what I'm thinking. And yeah, the whole thing with one thing I will say I did like, and again this is very reminiscent of It's a Good Life, was the spooky way they played the start of the episode, where you don't know he has powers and the other crew comes on board and they're being very sort of obviously scared, but trying to hide it and being like, oh, Charlie's a great guy, we love Charlie, he's good, well, no, we gotta go, see you later, no, we gotta go, we can't stay, bye, see you later, oh my god, let's get the fuck out of here. Like that was really good, and that was really reminiscent, at least of the movie version of that It's a Good Life, because they were acting the same way about the psychiatrist who was visiting town, who had no idea what was going on with the kid, and so that really reminded me of that, but I think worked. But then again, yeah, they shouldn't have just copied it. It's a Good Life. I'm sorry. They shouldn't have. They should have took it in the original direction. Yeah, so my rating for Charlie X out of 10 is a 3. Very poor. I'm sorry. I'm surprised so many people like this episode. I think it could have been good. It could have been good had they taken it in a different direction, as I said, but the direction they took it in is completely unoriginal, uninspired, and it doesn't make sense because they portray this monster sociopath and expect us to feel sorry for him at the end. No, that's bad writing. It is bad writing, and he doesn't come off as relatable or like a teenager I could relate to or view adolescence through. He comes off as a sociopath, spoiled brat who wants to kill, doesn't give a shit about killing 20 people and ripping people's faces off. So fuck that guy. Anyway, that is it for my review of Charlie X. I shall return for more Star Trek reviews. Oh, let me check the good old schedule, as Mr. Pickard would say. Alright, so according to the schedule, Prodigy will be Thursday, of course, and then Saturday will be my revisited of Balance of Terror for the Patreon supporters over on Patreon. Will be my revisited for Balance of Terror on my main channel. Of course, my existing review of Balance of Terror will be added to the playlist. And then on Monday will be the top 10 most underrated episodes, something I released for my patrons 2 months ago. Will go live on my channel. And Thursday, and Prodigy again. So I won't be back until with a new review until next Saturday with What Are Little Girls Made Of? So that will be the next new review I will be doing, but then I'll be doing Balance of Terror Revisited over on Patreon in the meanwhile. And on my main channel, I'll have the top 10 most underrated. So yeah, you can keep an eye out for that. Now, as always, I am keeping with the new tradition, we'll want to give a huge shout out thank you to the Patreon supporters that support me and keep this channel going. Very much appreciated. Yeah, it really helps me out. So, Patreon supporters, we have Anthony D. Benedictus, Ricky, Matty Jester, Joel Avals, Brian A., Alessandro Michelaccio, Norman Buckwald, Stephen Kennedy, Britton Berg, Allison Fordyce, and Brandon Hiles. Thank you so much for your support, and if you would like to support me on Patreon, also would be very much appreciated. You get early access to videos like this and exclusive access to my revisited cities, as well as some other perks here and there. Anyway, thanks so much for watching and checking this out, and be sure to check out my channel as I cover many more Star Trek stuff and other shows like Prodigy and what else that I feel like doing. So be sure to subscribe so you can keep up with all of that, and thanks a lot for watching.